In 1923, at just 19 years old, Howard Hughes became one of the richest men in America and moved to Hollywood to pursue his dreams of becoming a filmmaker. Fast forward 9 years later, and he would release a film that would shake up the entire pre-code era of Hollywood, based on the life of Al Capone himself. After Capone was sent to jail in 1930, films like Little Caesar and The Public Enemy became popular for retelling Capone's rise to power. But this new film would spend over a year on the shelves after being deemed too violent and for glorifying the life of Al Capone by the New York censor boards. But was it really the censors in New York? Or was it Al Capone himself pulling the strings from his cell to ensure that nobody would ever see the movie, aptly titled
Scarface?
Due to the lengthy delays, there was a lot of publicity surrounding this film which criticized the New York censor board's handling of Scarface, even going as far to accuse them of taking bribes or being outright forced by Al Capone to not allow the movie to be seen at all. But it was seen, and in early previews it was hailed for being ahead of its time and a new kind of picture that deserved plenty of attention at the box office. The censors wanted Hughes to change the ending of his film, in which Scarface would turn himself in, be tried and found guilty, and then hanged, which Hughes thought was absolutely ridiculous, and threatened a showdown with state censors to release his film without their approval, which is what he ended up doing in 1932, in defiance of the New York censor board when he released Scarface in New York to great fanfare. Hughes did not want to pull any punches. He wanted to tell the story as he thought it should be told, without the censors meddling in it at all. Scarface wanted to tell you the story as if you were really there, a witness to the crimes that were still fresh on everybody's minds. Early advertisements of the movie take advantage of the idea that all of Gangdom does not want you to see this picture, that Al Capone himself is afraid of you seeing this movie because of its realistic depictions of the title character as a coward and terror-inducing mob boss who brings about his own demise and the demise of everyone around him. The newspaper ads feature a lot of Scarface and the rest of the female characters in the movie, and plays off the relationships between Scarface and the female cast. It depicts Scarface as a coward and also a evil character who has kept Chicago under a grip of tyranny and violence. By the time the movie did come out, the public had already seen the portrayal of Scarface brought to you in advertisements from newspapers and magazines, and they knew the story that someone was trying to keep this movie from you. They're definitely trying to attract an adult audience here. There's no room for kids in Scarface. But they're also inviting you to kind of live up the life as if you were living right next to Tony Scarface Camonte in his final days.
I'm not afraid. I'm like you, Tom.
Don't let it talk. You're not afraid. Come on, we're going. The crime scenes in this film are based on events that actually happened.
Don't you know it's Valentine's Day?
Just like other social realism movies of the time, Scarface captures the attention of the audience by recreating recent events from history and challenging the audience to come to their own conclusions. The thing is, anybody who picked up a newspaper during the 20s would know what Scarface was going to be about just by seeing a picture of the movie or a poster or an advertisement. It sells itself. So because of this, the movie didn't really need any stars. It features Paul Muni in the title character as Scarface, and before Scarface, nobody really knew who Paul Muni was. But after Scarface, it launched him into stardom, as many believed it was the best portrayal of Al Capone. As Sidney Skolsky writes in his article, no one, not even Edward G. Robinson or Leo Carrillo, could have approached Muni's portrayal of the rotten gangster who was living and getting rich because of Prohibition. Scarface made Paul Muni a star. Scarface didn't need any stars to be sold, really. The only star that's in the movie is actually Boris Karloff, who everyone would still remember for playing Frankenstein's monster just a year earlier.
Step on it.
also because of the situation with the New York Censor Board, there wasn't a lot of merchandise for this movie, but it was based on a book by Armitage Trail. There were lobby cards that were made for this movie, although they were likely not present in most movie theaters because most movie theaters were not going to be playing Scarface until 1932 when it was eventually forced into theaters. But these lobby cards do show a nice preview of the things that you would see in the movie, like Scarface facing off with high class and police alike in his climb to the top of the ranks of the Chicago mob. Most of these lobby cards are in color and feature a lot of the action and memorable scenes from the movie. There's also a wide collection of various posters from the era. This is the main poster for Scarface, which shows Scarface in the pivotal scene where he becomes the mob boss. There's also this alternate poster which features Paul Muni's character holding the infamous Thompson machine gun. And this would be one of the first times that the Chicago typewriter, or Tommy gun, would be featured in a feature film. Now these are the French posters for the movie, and as you'll notice, they depict Scarface in more of a sympathetic light, kind of making him seem more of like the hero to the story. You'll also notice that Howard Hughes' name is not plastered all over these posters, and there's more of a focus on color and violence. In this final Italian poster for the film, the use of the color green makes Scarface look like kind of a monster.
The sale of whiskey, wine, and beer was prohibited by law, but there were many willing to break that law. Gangsters took over. Crime flourished. Mobs fought each other for prime territories, and blood flowed in the streets.
Scarface was one of the films that helped define the gangster genre and focuses most of its plot on the fall of Al Capone. It also features elements that would go on to define the film noir genre, like high contrasted shadows, featuring a main character that is morally corrupt, a tough guy who isn't afraid of getting his hands dirty. Another key element from the plot that's focused on is how Scarface draws down everyone around him, including the women in his life. As one critic would go on to write about Scarface, it's a tough game and you can't win. That's the story. Scarface draws on the public outcry of the violence that was taking place in Chicago at the time. Also, the frustration that Al Capone could essentially get away with anything, including murder. Finally, there was a movie that was going to tell you the real story. The film never tries to convince us that Scarface is a decent person. That's why the ending didn't need to be changed. It's an indictment about a character, a real-life character, who terrorized the city for years.
Next time I catch you in a place like that again, I'll kill you.
You're telling me what to do? What I do it, fellas, is my business!
I think it's very interesting that Scarface spent so long without being seen by anyone, and if Hollywood had learned anything, it's that you can't tell Howard Hughes what to do. I think it's also very interesting that after the movie came out, it was rumored that Al Capone liked it so much that he had his own personal copy of the film in his cell. I think it's also an interesting example of censorship versus the director's vision, because Howard Hughes was right. He had a point. He wanted to tell his story his way. The censors had no right to change that. So once the movie did come out, there were some compromises made. They added the Shame of the Nation to the title, and in certain areas they didn't actually do anything. They just released the movie outright without any changes. And it's not like everybody was clamoring to go see this movie. In fact, in Chicago, it took an additional 9 years until the movie would be released. But it's crazy to me that one of the greatest and most influential crime movies of all time almost never got seen.